right, we are now live streaming and recording. So, Mr. Mayor, you are ready to start the
Very
meeting.
good. Thank you. I will call to order the City of St. Helena Special City Council meeting Tuesday, July 13th, 2021. Cindy, could you give us the quick rundown on remote access, please?
So instructions are on the agenda. I don't have the meeting ID in front of me, but instructions for the public to participate is included on the agenda.
Very good. Thank you. And we'll move now. I don't have my flag today, so we'll move forward. We'll forego the pledge with just a quick acknowledgement of our national commitment to liberty and justice for all. And we'll move to our roll call.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Here.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Here.
Councilor Chateau?
Here.
Hall?
I'm here.
Hardy?
Here.
Oh, I'm saying Councilmember Chateau.
Yes, thank you. I don't know whether I should have done this before or after roll call, but our city attorney, Ethan, reached out to me this morning and we discussed my involvement, and he advised that it was better that I recuse myself, and he can explain the details.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Chateau. Just to note, as the council is aware, Councilmember Chateau has a financial interest in the Hall Winery, and during the consideration of adjustments to the ordinance to consider an adjustment to the fees or the methodology for determining the thresholds for commercial users, I advised that she recuse herself because that could have those decisions could have a financial impact on Hall Winery and wineries in general. And similar to that, if we are considering adjustments to the penalties, I think that could, in theory, have a financial impact on her financial interests that's different than those of kind of the public generally and the other council members. And so I recommended to her that to be on the conservative side, she recuse herself from this discussion and not participate in this morning's meeting. If there's any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. I'm seeing Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I have the same personal concern with the Pistone Family Estate Winery in Rutherford. So I'll be recusing myself.
Okay. Thank you. And then we'll see, we'll reconvene for our closed session later, where we'll see at least Councilmember Hall. So thank you very much, and we'll proceed.
Just one question going forward. Does the recusal of Councilmember Chateau also apply to the participation on the Water Advisory Board? And if so, we're going to have to deal with that if we're always going to be one short. There's going to be an issue there. That's the reason I'm raising it. Maybe it's premature, but I'd like to at least be prepared going forward, because we're going to have a lot of activity on that Water Advisory Board, I assume. Thank you.
Right. Right. And that's a good question, Vice Mayor Doring. I actually do not think it applies to her work on the Water Advisory Board, because in that instance, the Water Advisory Board deals with specific applicants. So if, say, Hall Winery were to come and ask for some sort of relief, then she would have to recuse herself from that. But when other applicants request, relief, then she doesn't have a financial interest in that instance, and so she can still participate in that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we will get ready to proceed here, and we'll move into our section of adoption of the agenda. I'll ask the city clerk if there's been any change to the agenda.
No changes, Mr. Mayor.
I'll move that we adopt the agenda.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Hardy?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. So now we'll move to public comment. This is where, under California law, public comments at special meetings are limited to subjects on the agenda only. Therefore, public comment will take place during consideration of the item. Each person's comments shall be limited to 4 minutes. We'll move now then to our new business and our item 5.1. This is presentation of June 2021 water meter reads and penalty overview, discussion and direction regarding City Council Water Ad Hoc Committee Phase 2 Water Emergency Usage Penalties Recommendation. And we'll go to our City Manager, Mark Prestwich.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, everyone. Just to give you a little context about how we arrived at this special meeting, late Thursday afternoon, I was advised by our Administrative Services Director that in addition to completing meter reads over the last week, the calculations had been done for penalties for the usage in June. And June 2021 is the first month that the city's penalties do apply to water use in excess of the target conservation factors for both the businesses and residents. And given the scale of the penalties, which at the time was described as approximately $2.9 million, we'll talk a little bit more about that number later today. The next day, I spoke with the mayor and Councilmember Hardy, two members of the council designated water ad hoc, to discuss the significance of those numbers. And it was decided at that time that we would look at the possibility of scheduling a special meeting before the bills were released to discuss these numbers and to think about essentially how to move forward. The bills were scheduled, as of last Friday, the bills were scheduled to go out tomorrow on Wednesday. And so over the weekend, the Administrative Services Director and I prepared this staff report. We posted the agenda, I believe, on Sunday, and we're here today to share with you information about the June 2021 meter reads, as well as the penalties that are associated with that, and share with you some recommendations. So I'm going to share my screen, and April Mitz and I, our Admin Services Director, will share this presentation, and we'll start with an overview of, let's make sure everyone can see this. Is everyone able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is an overview of our presentation. We're going to first just walk briefly through the background of our water emergency and discuss how we arrived here. We're going to talk a bit about the water penalty structure that was adopted by the City Council early this year. We'll present the data regarding the June 2021 water meter reads, as well as the usage penalties, and break that down for everyone. We're going to also share with you data on how is our water forecast working, what's the capacity of Bell Canyon looking like, and then share with you the Water Ad Hoc Committee and staff recommendation. So this is just a bit of background related to the water emergency. We entered the Phase 1 water emergency on June 23rd, 2020. A few months later, on October 27th, the city entered the Phase 2 water emergency, where we've been ever since. That required us to move in a lot of directions. We worked on recruiting a water advisory board. That board has started meeting, as the council knows. We also had policy discussions about a penalty structure that would be necessary, because we did not have one in place when the water emergency began. And on April 13th, 2021, the water penalty structure was adopted. Shortly thereafter, the council adopted an urgency ordinance on April 27th to update the commercial, industrial, and institutional users due to the seasonal nature of the water use. And this was really in regards to wineries in particular that use a lot of water at one time of the year. And so today, the methodology for the non-residential side of our accounts essentially is a month over month contrast with the prior 3 non-drought years. In this case, that's 2017, 2018, and 2019. So we take an average of those numbers for the month of June in 17, 18, and 19, contrast it with the water usage in 2021. and identify whether the conservation of 10% has been achieved or not. On the residential side, in phase 2, the typical allocation is 65 gallons per person per day, plus a 2,500 gallon allotment for outdoor irrigation. It does change for larger lots. And as noted here in June, this is the first month that our penalties apply. So this is an overview of the the adopted water penalty structure. And there are essentially 4 different classifications for volume exceeded. And just as a reminder, walking back to the rationale and the thinking as we approached adoption of this penalty structure, this structure was intended to provide a strong price signal and a message without using a big stick approach at average water use. It's a graduated scale. And that means that it minimizes penalties for those bills that are just exceeding the allocation, where accounts can reasonably reduce below the allocation in subsequent billing periods. And at the same time, it maximizes penalties for wasteful water use and for those accounts that require financial compulsion to reduce use. So that's the reason why it has a graduated scale. It's really is a reminder for those that are slightly moving over, up to 25% over the target conservation factors. And it provides a strong price incentive for customers using more than 100% above that water allocation. And now I'm going to turn it over to April Mitz.
So thank you very much. So the next 4 slides that we'll review is just an overview of what we actually saw with the June 2021 meter reads. Also taking into consideration, we've been working close with Ralph Tellis, who's helped us analyze these numbers, put this information together, and then we are still scrubbing some of the data. So there are certain allocations where exemptions have been filed, and we're just verifying that information. So knowing these numbers might change a little bit, but I'd say maybe 10 of the total accounts will change. So these are not the final numbers yet. We still have a little more scrubbing to do. But when we look at the 4 different bins, so on the left-hand side, you have your volume exceeded. So between 0 and 25%, 25 and 50, 50% and 100%, and then over 100%, you'll see out of our total number of accounts, and we have 2,425 accounts. Out of those accounts, 900 did exceed their allocation. And then you'll see those that exceeded the allocation under 25% was 206 accounts. In the 25% to 50% range, 149 accounts. The 50% to 100%, 174 accounts. And then 100% plus is 371 accounts. Next slide. So here's where it breaks down as far as the dollar allocation. So you'll see the good news is out of the total number of accounts, out of 2,425 accounts, we had over 1,500 that received no penalties. So 63% of our population did live within their allocation. So I think that is great news. We have a majority of people that did live within their allocation. If you go down a little further, you'll see what broke down to essentially a penny to $100. There were 337 accounts, and that accounts for almost $11,000 in penalties. And then you'll see how it breaks down even further. So the majority of all of our water customers have a penalty under $1,000. And then you'll see where we go up to the higher dollar amounts. And you will see in particular, if you look to the last 2 lines, that 50,000 to 100,000 and 100,000 plus, you'll see that there's 4 accounts in the 50 to 100,000 and then 2 accounts in the $100,000 plus range. Again, that totals 2.9, almost $3 million in penalties. Next slide. So what we did now is we did a little further research, and we broke it down into the non-residential versus residential categories, just so council can get an idea of where everything falls. Residential customers do account for approximately 60% of our total water customers, where non-residential are the other 40%. So you'll see for the non-residential side, we have a total of 281 of our accounts are non-residential. And so we have 184 of them did not receive any penalties, which is 65%. And then you'll see the total number of accounts. Oh, I'm sorry, I got that information wrong when I broke down the percentage. Non-residential accounts for 12% of our total accounts, and then the rest are residential customers. So you'll see you have the number of accounts within this category, and then you have percentage of total accounts. And so this percentage accounts is a total percentage of the 2,425 accounts. So you can see the breakdown. And then you have the percentage of accounts in the category. So for non-residential, you'll see it's 65% of that total 281 accounts in the non-residential category did not receive any penalties. And then you'll see the 13%, 5%, and then 5% and 11% within the category. So you see where they break down into this range. We also wanted to highlight on the right-hand side, it shows the number of accounts that it received leak letters. And so this is something that when we read our meters, when we go out and read the meters, we have a leak alarm that's triggered. And what that will do is that will tell us any accounts that had 24 hours of continuous usage. And where we wanted to highlight that 9 accounts, so in that 100 plus category, so these are customers who exceeded their allocation by 100% plus, 9 of them received leak letters. And so that's something that 2 of the highest users, we've already reached out to them personally. Martine Beltran had done that just to let them know that we sent a leak alarm letter, but we also physically called them to let them know so they can start working on seeing where that leak might be, so we don't have as significant of a leak in the following month. And so if you go to the next slide, you'll see the same breakdown for your residential categories. So again, the first column is your number in that particular category. Total number of accounts for 88% are in the residential category. And this includes single family, multifamily, as well as mobile home parks. And here, the next category over, you'll see the number in the category. And again, we've highlighted the higher areas where it's, you see how much are in the higher volume that was used, the percent of penalties for the total account.
Could you just pause for 1 second? So I'm looking at a
absolutely.
chart. This chart shows non-residential. Is that an error?
Oh, that's correct. The upper left corner should say residential.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I can adjust that real quick.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Doreen.
Sorry, we'll jump
And
through
we're going to
that
start
again.
from the beginning.
There we go.
And again, if you look at the residential side, you'll see the yellow highlighted areas, and particularly the number with the leak letters. So there were 61 residential accounts that were in the 100 plus range that did receive leak letters. And so that will take into account further on in our discussion with some of the recommendations by both myself, City Manager Prestwich, as well as the working group of Council Member Hardy and Mayor Ellsworth. And then next, I'm going to turn it back over to City Manager Prestwich.
Thank you, April. And before I move to the next slide, I think just again to reinforce the far right column on both this chart and the prior chart, the leaks that occur, with the technology of the meters that we have deployed in the city, it reads once every 30 days approximately. The next generation meters will read in real time. And so obviously there is going to be, when we eventually invest in those next generation meters, it will provide an opportunity to substantially reduce water use, because some of the excess use, half of the penalty, half of the leak letters in both the residential side and the non-residential side found themselves in the 100% category here. So opportunities to reduce costs to customers and opportunities to substantially reduce water use as well upon investment in the next generation meters. So this is a look at the water forecast for Bell Canyon Reservoir. And in order to fit this onto a single slide, I did skip every other month. So the numbers, look at them from a trend perspective. The chart starts at where we are today on as of July 1 in Bell Canyon. This is above the 25% reserve. We have 306 acre feet. That AF is acre feet. The monthly use is what we are forecasting, programming. So moving every other month through the rainy season and into next May, this is the monthly use that would occur in each month. The remaining supply is what we forecast will occur at Bell Canyon while also using our other sources of water and managing through that. So really the takeaway with the remaining supply is there is supply left at the end of this calendar year, and through the rainy season, that supply continues to, if we don't use a lot of water in Bell Canyon, that supply is still, there's still essentially a little bit of supply at the end of May next year. The 10 inches, 20 inches, and 30 inches refers to rainfall. So what we did is what we have in a worksheet. I have a spreadsheet over here that has the details, but essentially we've modeled 10 inches of rain, 20 inches of rain, and 30 inches of rain. And we're really keen in on the 10 inches of rain, just assuming that for conservative analytical purposes that we need to assume a low rainfall season. So assuming 10 inches of rain, which we would consider very low, this is what happens to Bell Canyon's reservoir beginning in November, when we begin to be able to count those acre feet of raindrops, and it starts to grow back before it begins to decline in May of 2022.
Mark,
so that's
Vice Mayor Doring's hand.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a point of clarification. These numbers, do they include the 25% that has to be set aside for fire, or is this above and beyond that minimal threshold that we have to maintain?
Right. This is above and beyond.
Okay.
So what this tells us is that, and by the way, the other factor that we've taken into consideration is we've modeled the existing conservation efforts. So, which is approximately 23% today is being delivered. 23% less is being delivered this year versus last year, and 17% is the water customers are using 17% less at the meters overall relative to last year. So yes, the good news is the water use and the water production is lower than last year, but obviously we can do more. And the more we do, the more we leave water in Bell Canyon and reduce the probability that we slip from a phase 2 to a phase 3 emergency. So we remain in phase 2. The risks to our system are possible use of water for firefighting purposes later this year, some form of failure on our system, some contamination that needs to result in flushing. I mean, there are a number of situations where we could end up seeing a significant amount of water used. And obviously we hope that we avoid that. And at the moment, it looks like we'll remain in phase 2 moving forward. Are there other questions about the water forecast? Okay. So to transition to the water ad hoc recommendations, this is something that I want to say thank you to our new Public Works Director, City Engineer Mark Rincon, April Mitz for all of her work during the weekend, Mayor Ellsworth, and Councilmember Hardy for working with staff on this. Given the fact that this is the first time penalties have been applied, given the scale of the penalties, and also trying to balance this against the quite vital conservation needs that our city needs in order to navigate through this water emergency, and really balancing this against the policy goal of the penalties, which includes some significant penalties for significant water use. The ad hoc committee and the city staff are recommending implementation of a penalty forgiveness program. And the way it would work is this. For the month of June, The concept is to suspend 75% of the June penalties, which means that we would bill for 25% of the June penalties. So approximately over 700,000, little over $700,000 of penalties. And because this meeting's occurring about halfway through the month of July, and assuming that because customers have not received their bills yet, the concept is 50% of July 2021 penalties, because word of these penalties is going to spread fast through the community, and when people receive their bills, they'll have an opportunity to immediately adjust if they find themselves in a situation where their water usage exceeds the targets. So we would bill for 50% of July penalties, and then these penalties in June and July of 2021 could be forgiven if the customer does not exceed their targeted allocation in August, September, October, and November of 2021. So what this does is it puts that entire responsibility, the opportunity for the customer to control whether they pay penalties or not. Because if they conserve, and we're going to need their help in August, September, October, November, if they conserve, they can work on removing those penalties. If the customer does not keep their usage below the targets prescribed in August, September, October, and November, any suspended amount would then become payable to the city. So that's the recommendation. And we're happy to answer any questions that the council has.
Are there any initial questions from the council before I go to public comment? I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
I'll unmute myself. That makes it better. I wanted to go back to the chart that shows the breakdown on penalties for the non-residential users. There, thank you. So remind me, please, in these two categories highlighted in yellow, 50 to 100% and 100%. How many of those customers have received leak notifications?
I can answer that. So that one in the 50 to 100%, there were 15 users that are receiving penalties. Of those 15, 4 of them did receive a leak letter. In the 100% plus category, there are 31 total customers where penalties are being assessed. And out of those 31, 9 of them received leak letters.
The thing that really stands out for me here is that on the non-residential side, well, it's kind of a compare and contrast thing. So I'll start with residential. Residential use, because of the way in which we allocate water, which is very different from non-residential, simply using water the way you do normally could easily result in being 100% over. If you've got a yard where in the summer you're irrigating, 5,000 gallons a month and not 2,500, there you are. You're going to be close to 100% over right there. The non-residential category, the math is really very different because the allocation is 90% of the same month over a 3 non-drought year average. So to go 100% over means the customer is using at least 180% of the water that they used in average over a 3-year non-drought period. That's a huge increase actually in normal water use. If we define their normal water use in terms of the average over the 3-year period. It's a bit difficult to understand what's going on there. It's not what it isn't. What it doesn't look like is business as usual, by definition. Where perhaps that's really the problem with most of the high use or high overage residential accounts. So, you know, some of those numbers come out. I've got 4 out of 15, so that would be 11 customers at 50 to 100% did not get a leak report. And we've got 22 customers, non-residential customers, 100% or more over, who did not get a leak report. My belief is that it's really important for us to find out more about what is happening with those really high overages on the non-residential side. Because again, those numbers reflect usage that is so much in excess of the 3-year average. It's not simply in excess of the allocation. Those numbers are very much in excess of the 3-year average. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And we can circle back for a response. I'm seeing the hand of Vice Mayor Doring.
Yeah, well, this wasn't my question, but I agree with Councilmember Hardy. I think first of all, the pendulum swung way too far, maybe way too generous for commercial industrial use. And then you have a situation where you've given that benefit, and yet the water somehow, for whatever reason, and I agree we need to drill down on that, has actually increased on that side. And I know that's not going to sit well with a lot of folks in the residential community. So we're going to have to make an adjustment there. Maybe that's not the subject of today's conversation, but I agree with you. I don't want to get in the middle of a class warfare here, you know, with the burden shifting so heavily on residential. And I understand the reasons for why we did that, but so we're going to have to really resolve that. My question is more on the leak detection history, because it seems, I don't know what the answer is, but according to the staff report, there were 136 leaks detected. And I'm just wanting to know some history behind that. So what was it in May and in April and maybe last year? Is that it seems like a really high number, and I don't know why that's happened all of a sudden. Do we know? And is it relatively similar to prior years when you get that many leaks all of a sudden in one month? That would be interesting for me to look at. And then the other thing is on the leaks and how we deal with that at the Water Advisory Board. I assume and I hope that we are going to insist that the Water Advisory Board use objective measures when they're granting some kind of an exception or a reduction in their bills based on our leak detection policy or some objective measurement, and not simply a sort of a subjective analysis of applicant by applicant. So those, I'm focusing now on the leak detection. And then we'll have that other discussion that Councilmember Hardy raised, because I think it is a very important discussion.
Thank you. Councilmember Hardy? Oh, you're still muted, Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Mayor. Vice Mayor Doring's comments reminded me that I also have a question about the leak detection technology. City Manager, I believe you said that with our current technology, we get the information only once a month. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, it's not obvious to me. Well, a meter reading, a monthly meter reading, it can be something like an instantaneous reading. It's a moment in time. It's what the meter says at this moment, whether it's noon, 1 p.m., whatever it is. But leak detection necessarily involves some longer period of time, because leak detection, at least as I've always understood it, it results from the observation that the meter is spinning continuously. So you can't you can't generate a leak detection report from an instantaneous reading. What period of time does this technology use then?
I'm going to have Dr. Mitz help me with that one because I think there's additional data when we read the meters that it presents information related to the 24-hour nature of a use.
Yeah.
April?
Yes, that is correct. Yes, that's correct. We do meter reads once a month. And what happens is when the data is pulled from the meter reads, it will trigger a leak, basically a leak alarm that will say, hey, you had 24 hours of continuous movement on your meter. And so that's what actually triggers the leak adjustment, or sorry, the leak alarm. So it's based off of that information. As of right now, the technology we have, we don't have the ability to do instantaneous where it notifies us if a leak or notifies the customer. In the last rate study that we did, we did, because that's part of just upgrading our entire system to be able to do something very instantaneous like that. We did have it in our previous rate study to upgrade the system, and at that point, the cost to upgrade our entire system was about $1 million. So about $500,000 to replace all the meters, another $500,000 for the infrastructure. Because of the rates and how high they were going for both the water and the wastewater side, we did actually have that, the public works director at the time did actually remove that from the rate study. So it's something that there is technology out there where we could do it, and that way customers could literally sign up where if they're notified immediately if there's some type of leak detected. We don't have that. We don't have that capability right now. So I hope that answers that question. I do want to circle back to, it was another question from both Councilmember Dorian and Councilmember Hardy, regarding the comparables for leaks. So just so you get an idea, in June 2020, we had a total of 277 leak letters that were sent. In June 2021, we actually had a total of 232 leak letters that were sent. However, of that 232, only 136 of them resulted in somebody having a penalty. And so the 136 that's in the report were people that received leak letters that had penalties associated with it. And then if you compare the total leak letters in June 2021 of 232 compared to May 2021, there was 207 leak letters sent in May. And so that kind of gives you an idea of just the more recent analytics and then also the comparatives to the previous year. So I hope that helps answer some of those questions.
I do. And do we know whether, so if you're comparing May to June, do we have enough data or analysis to make a comparison whether those are, for lack of a better word, second-time offenders, or, are these new leaks? Because it does make a difference if somebody is not really taking care of their leaks, and it continues from May to June, throughout the summer season. Do we know? Do we have any more information on that point? And then I'd like to have my question answered regarding the Water Advisory Board's process in terms of dealing with leak detection applicants. Thanks.
I do not have that information as of right now, whether somebody is a reoccurring leak. Martin Beltran actually handles that program for us. And so that's something he could run those numbers to see if it's somebody who is repeated month over month. As far as the leak policy, my recommendation would be to take the parameters that we currently have for our leak, granting leak exception requests, and maybe utilizing those same parameters. Because what we do is when under phase 1 and phase 2, if somebody has a leak, we don't actually allow them to file a leak adjustment. However, city manager's purview, he does have the purview to grant leak exceptions up to $5,000. But what I would recommend is using some of the same parameters. And the first parameter is, you haven't ignored the leak. So, we can check our leak reports to see if you've received numerous notices of a leak. It's showing that you're just throwing that leak letter away, and you're probably not taking it seriously. The other thing is we do require that they have to have proof that leak has been fixed. So whether that is you show us your bills, bills that you've paid for a plumber to either come out and detect and or fix that leak, or if you see a decrease in usage. Because a lot of times some of those leaks might just be a toilet that's stuck or something like that, and where we can see clearly with the next meter read that consumption has gone down, we would take that into consideration. So I would make a recommendation that if anything goes to the Water Advisory Board to adjust the penalty side of it, that we actually utilize the same parameters within our leak policy, our currently council approved leak policy. So I hope that answers some of those questions, Vice Mayor Doring.
Thank you. And I agree that we need to make sure that we have an objective policy so the due process goes forward, rather than, I don't want to be a perception that people are allowed to just ignore their leaks. And I think generally people don't do that in our community, but that you need to respond to them. You should not be rewarded if you got 4 letters from the city. That's my point there. Thank you.
I still have some questions about the leak detection and meter reading technology here. I understand that we don't have a system that will generate continuous data, but I also understand that when you get the download from the meters, that leak detection information comes with it, which means data for some period of time is being stored somewhere. I don't know if that's in the meter or where, but that data has to be stored, since it takes information over a period of time in order to detect the leak. I don't know how long that period is in the system, if it's 24 hours or what, but here's my question, Dr. Metz. Do we have a choice as to how often we get the meter read? Because if it's possible to get a meter read once a week rather than once a month, then in this period of water emergency, we have the opportunity, it would seem, to get leak detection reports more frequently.
So for the first question, the data is actually stored on the meter itself, because what we can do is we can provide detailed meter reads, and we've gone back as I've seen some as far as a year that we've gone back. But the particular meter has to be capable of it. Most of our meters are. There's a couple of the older meters that are not capable of that. But when we do the detailed meter read, it will literally give us a day-by-day, hour-by-hour reading on it. And so we can see, and that's something that on our side, we can look and we can see trends. We can tell exactly when somebody's irrigation goes on. We can tell when their irrigation is set. So we do have those capabilities. As far as a choice for meter reads, we can definitely choose to do meter reads more often. However, that does come with a very heavy labor side that's associated with it. Because when we do meter reads, it typically takes anywhere from 2 to 3 days, because our staff physically has to drive through every street within the city for the information to get basically uploaded into, we call it a stick. The stick goes into City Hall. We download the information. We see how many misread meters there are. It's typically right between the 80 and 100 misread meters every month. Then they have to go back out to those particular streets, drive the streets to get those misread meters. So the total process does take about 2 to 3 days. Current staffing, it would be very, very difficult to try to do that, but we definitely have the choice where we can do them more often, and it's just very labor intensive to do it.
So then it would be possible and less labor intensive to follow up on those meters where you had a leak detection report.
If I'm not quite can you repeat that, Lester? I'm sorry.
Sure. Well, it sounds like if just pick a number in the month of June, you have 200 leaks detected, generating the leak detection notices. To follow up a week, 2 weeks later, as to those 200 meters would not be such a big job as doing a complete meter read. Am I right?
I would defer to Public Works on that one because they know more of the intricacies of what it would take to go to those individualized meters. I would almost assume, again, I'll defer over to Public Works, that it would take almost the same amount of time because at that point, you're not driving by, you are going to each individual location where that meter is located and you're actually getting a detailed data profile. So at that point, it's not driving by, it's physically getting out and going to that particular meter. So on the surface, I would almost think it would take as much time, but again, I would defer over to Public Works. And I don't know if Mark Rincon has that answer or potentially Martine, who is on the attendee side.
Mark, are you with us to give a take on that?
I can talk to my background in other locations. I don't have the specifics for these meters, but in terms of meter reading, we do it basically for financial purposes to collect, it's the till. We need to collect information to see how much we're going to charge. Now, for managing the water system, yes, we could go out and we could read the meters more frequently. Of course, that takes more labor because you do have to go by each meter. Even though these are electronic reads, nonetheless, we have to be nearby to collect the information. So there is that element of adding more staff time to collect it, but that's a priority that we can set. In terms of information, I'm not really familiar with the exact meters here. If it collects information on a day-to-day basis, there's probably a way we could dig down deeper, but I would defer that question to Martine at this point because he's been focused on this aspect for a while.
City Manager Mark, do we want to get into the depths of this at this point with Martine? What's your thought? I agree that looking at strategies for how to identify the problem areas are very important. I just want to get your take on how far into the details we're going right now.
Well, Martine, I don't know if you have any additional information to share in terms of the questions raised at this point.
The only thing I would like to add is we can't, for the meter detailed reports, those have to be done in person physically at the meter itself. So it's not that we can generate those from the office. And then once they generate that report, then they are sent over as a CSV file. So it's raw data. And then at an admin level, we have to clean it up to make it presentable. And we switch it over to a PDF and then share that with the customer.
So there are ways that we can read meters more frequently and follow up on individual leaks. This is a temporary issue because there'll be a point in time at some point that the city invests in the next generation of meters. But at the moment, this presents a bit of a challenge logistically, and as the city engineer, public works director indicated, we can adjust priorities.
Yeah, what the driving thought for me, and it just starts with the observation that we have, percentage-wise, a significant percentage of our biggest overruns in the non-residential side are on accounts where there's been a leak detection report. It's something, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but on a rough cut, it's something like 20% of the 50% or more over accounts, there's a leak detection report. I don't have any way to associate a volume of water with those leak detection reports, but the fact that they occur in significant number in accounts that are way over the allocation, at least presents some cause for concern that there are significant leaks involved with those particular accounts. And thus, for some subset at least of the total number of leak detection reports, it seems following up to make sure that the leak is fixed promptly may be worth the effort in a time of water emergency. That's my thought. Thank you.
And that's a thought I concur with. I think looking at our supply, protecting our supply, what we need to do, and come up with strategies. I also, in hearing the vice mayor's comments, regarding the fact that we have done as much as we can to give sort of guardrails on both the residential and the business side in terms of penalties. The expectation then is that folks stay within their allotments. And so we want to make sure that we're sending a message that this is a graduated approach we're trying to implement here to get a culture of everybody being on the same page and paying attention, that we have a very serious water situation. This is a situation every bit as serious as looking at something like a pandemic, where we all, where we all have to work together. And that includes our large users and the small users. But looking at those members of the large user class that have gone over, because it's relatively approachable in a number, I think we should be as proactive as possible in helping them understand what they can do and why, as quickly as possible, we can get those numbers turned around. I'm seeing the Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I'm just a follow up on Councilmember Hardy's comments. I wholly agree with them. We need to drill down on that data and be more timely. But we also need to encourage those who are in the business of making something out of water to take the onus upon themselves. Private industry has to step up and go, hey, there's a leak. It's in my best interest to reduce that bill by solving that leak. So I think it's a combination of what government can do to intervene, but also what the industry should be doing to make sure that they are really monitoring their own leak situation. Everybody has a different situation, and I know leaks are difficult to find. It takes a while. I've had a few cases where it took months to find a leak. It's not as obvious, oh, you just fixed the leak. So I get that part of it. I lost my train of thought. Let's see, what was I going to ask? I guess I would like to hear from the ad hoc committee. I don't know if there's a right answer or wrong answer, but I'm wondering what you think about the sort of the dead lawn argument, as I call it. Those folks who complied suffered to an extent that they've lost some landscaping. I don't know what the answer is, and I'm just thinking out loud here. Is there a way to create a reward at some point in time, either more with a cash back for reducing or something there? We have received some letters. I do want to acknowledge a couple of letters that came through. I think Mr. Belt, Mr. Smithers, and maybe others I didn't have a chance to read, but I don't know what the answer is. I get that you want to deal with this because these penalties are really super high. But there's also on the other side of it, you have folks who are like, I did my job, and I don't know if that sits well with folks. And I don't know if there's a response to that down the road, if we can help out there to create an incentive for those folks who have always complied all along, I guess.
I'll jump in with a couple thoughts and then hand it over to Councilmember Hardy. What I'm seeing in terms of numbers, I believe we're at roughly the mid 60 percentile in both business and residential. Is that correct, Dr. Mitz? For no penalties, but essentially closer to 75 to 80% for people that are under $100 of penalties, essentially. So what I'm seeing is we're getting a good amount of our community on board. We're not all the way there yet. what I believe this approach, this sort of graduated approach, is a tightening that hopefully sends a message. We're very, very serious. We get it, that we're not all going to be on the same page right at once, but we are aiming to be on the same page very shortly. I do agree that if we can look for a way to give some incentive or benefits for those who have complied, to get more folks over on that side, I think we should, be willing to look at those issues. I also, recognize the letters coming in, and we'll open public comment here soon, making those points. But something I want to stress here that is really difficult, just as it was with the pandemic, is we've all got to work together, and that means whether you're a small user or a large user. And sometimes for large users, it takes them a little bit of time to turn their ship in the right direction to get in line with everybody. We want to recognize that, but we're absolutely serious that everybody needs to get on board and meet our numbers and actually attempt to exceed them. So I support Mayor Doring in thoughts of what we can do to help people feel like those who have done their job should have some incentive or reward, and help folks wake up who haven't, that we all must get on board. So with that, I'll hand it over to Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a number of thoughts. I don't know that I'll get them all out in any organized order, but certainly everyone present, members of the public and everyone else, understand that I fully appreciate the sacrifices that residents are called upon to make with the limitation on landscape irrigation set at 2,500 gallons per month. In June, I was startled to see a fig tree that's been part of my backyard for as long as I've been in this house. I didn't plant it. I'm not sure how old it was, but this December, it'll be 35 years I've been in this house. So, that was a tree's been a part of my life for a long time, more than half of my life. And anyway, in June, it started to drop leaves like crazy. And I double checked my meter readings and figured out I could hand water it, so many gallons per week. And I started doing that. In the last 2-3 weeks, redwood tree in the yard has shown now really pretty severe signs of stress. I consulted with an arborist yesterday, and he had me
Mr. Hardy, is there a point you're going to be making here soon?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
It's going to take 1,000 gallons a month to keep that redwood tree going. I'm not going to be able to keep all my trees alive if things continue long enough this way. Those are hard choices for all of us. But the reward that comes from pulling on the oars together to get through this, I think, is just that. The only way we can make sort of the best possible result in this water emergency is if we all work together. And, we have penalties because we assume, I think correctly, that it takes a penalty structure to get everyone's attention. But the reward is we're out of phase 2 sooner and much less likely to go into phase 3. I mean, that is the big reward for the whole community. And the fact that we have people who get the benefit of other people's conservation is troubling. I don't really know that we have a great solution for that other than the penalties. But what we have in terms of a staff recommendation, I think, reflects the fact that we don't assume that everyone who's gone over in the month of June has done so intentionally or in willful disregard of our ordinance. We're concerned that some people really simply haven't taken in the requirements, haven't had enough experience tracking their water use, etc. So we're trying to make for an orderly transition that will, in the end, maximize our conservation effort, and the program or proposal to forgive penalties for those who are in full compliance in August, September, October, and November is intended to incentivize compliance. So, that's the concept. How well it works remains to be seen, but I think we're all on the same page with respect to goals. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we'll go to our public comment, and I believe at least one of the public comment letters was asked to be read aloud, and I wanted to check our policy on that. With Zoom, Mr. Prestwich, our policy on reading aloud public comment letters?
We don't have a formal policy, I don't believe, and I'm looking to the city clerk and our city attorney.
The practice has been, if the public comment is attached to the agenda, it is not read aloud since it is publicly available for the community and council to read.
Okay.
Which public comment are you referring to?
Well, I believe at least Mr. Smithers' comment letter wanted it to be
attached
read
to the agenda.
Okay, okay.
It's attached to the agenda and publicly available.
Okay. So with that, then I will open public comment and see if there's anybody on the line that is interested in giving public comment.
There is. A telephone caller with the last four digits of 5662. You are allowed to address the council.
I'm going to go ahead and read Mr. Smithers' letter. Thanks, Jeff, for bringing it up. We've both written letters, and I think that's important for the public to hear this. Mr. Smithers wrote, "I wholeheartedly agree with Tom Belt's comments included below. Most of us took the city's water restrictions seriously. Our lawn is dead. Our small vineyard will soon die. We have pulled out plants and shut off irrigation. We have conserved water to benefit all St. Helena residents. Apparently, there are a relatively small number of water customers that have not considered that we may have no water next spring. I've heard secondhand of residents that consciously knew they would pay penalties above $5,000, and they were okay with it. To some degree, you are pitting the wealthy against the poor that conserved. Now you are preparing to benefit the wealthy. Are you paying attention to any of the inequity discussions going to in our country? Further, if you go forward and approve the large eliminations of these penalties, you are telling us that our water enterprise doesn't need the money. You're saying it's okay to forego this revenue, that we need to fix our porous and aging water system, while at the same time saying you are okay raising rates in the future to pay for many projects to benefit the wealthy that don't care about water conservation. If you proceed, you will never be able to pass revenue bond financing for our much needed water infrastructure projects. Rates will be raised, and they will most affect those in difficult financial positions, and there will be less water conservation. Finally, it is unconscionable that you have scheduled such an important issue with 1 day's notice and continue to not allow in-person participation at city council meetings. And I'd like to just reinforce that myself. I noticed on today's agenda that my letter wasn't included. I believe city council and city staff is doing the public a disservice and making these decisions without fully vetting this information to the public and giving us a chance to respond in a reasonable amount of time. I'd also like to say, I know I'm running out of time. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. When I applied for one of the applications for more water, I was told by the committee that I had two choices: one, to buy water from another location outside of the city, or to pay the penalties. During this last month of June, I have stayed within my restriction, my allocation, and I just feel that this is a slap in the face to all the people in our city who have tried to recognize how important this issue is, and then your willingness to forgive them, especially on such a large level, to completely forgive or 75%. I think that's just a wrong idea. And so with that, obviously I'm upset. I apologize for that, but I think you're taking this matter way too liberally for those people who are watering their lawns and wasting in the commercial area alone. Obviously, these people spending using all this water. It's unbelievable to me that they're doing that, considering that we've been told as residents in the city that city was going to go out and talk to all these commercial customers and impress upon them how important this was and is, and what they were going to be doing to reduce their water usage, and yet this is still happening and you're willing to forgive it. I'm sorry, but that's all I have to say. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that, and I'm sure there are a lot of other residents in St. Helena that would like to make similar comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the public comment. And we'll go now to see if there's additional public comment.
There is. Nancy, I'm going to allow you to address the council. You have 4 minutes. You can unmute yourself.
Good morning, council and everybody else. First of all, I completely agree with Tom Belt and Mr. Smithers' comments. Over 63% of the population proved that the conservation demands could be met. The idea of waiving penalties and then giving people a chance to show they can do it is rewarding water abusers and penalizing water conservationists in the spirit of things anyway. I suggest that you enforce all penalties with a potential waiver where there is a known water leak, and give, I don't know, a 30-day grace that they've got to get it fixed. And if it takes longer, that's unfortunate. You've got to figure that out. But you should be enforcing these penalties. Everybody has known for a long time that this was coming, and majority of people have complied. So don't pull back on the penalties. If you want to give a rebate after these abusers have proven for 3 months that they are willing and will comply, then you could consider maybe a reward in the form of some kind of rebate. I don't know. But the other thing is, you're probably all aware of what a flume is. That's a brand name, but it's a real-time water monitor that a lot of residents have purchased and installed in their own homes. You can get them for $199 on Amazon. I suggest that you enforce the penalties and give a $199 rebate off the penalty for them, the water users, to utilize a flume, and offer to the city-wide, anybody that wants to put a flume on their home, give them a $199 rebate so that they can do real-time water monitoring, and it's second by second, 24 hours, 7 days a week, and it differentiates their outside landscape use versus inside home use. So it's a very effective thing. You guys made a huge mistake when you veered away from what virtually every other community for miles all around us have done in asking commercial users to reduce at the same rate as residential. That was a huge mistake, and I hope to God you're going to correct it. But in the meantime, if you don't want something that looks like or feels like a class war, you really need to stop treating commercial enterprises as a sacred cow in St. Helena, because people are getting pissed off and have been for a long time, and it's only getting worse. And I think every one of you knows it. And I know you're all good people, and this is really nothing personal. I think all of you are probably make great friends and relatives and all that. But when it comes down to city business, it has become so doggone political. It is pathetic. I'm sorry, but do something right. You have water penalties for a reason. Pulling them back is like giving a parole or probation to somebody who's done something really vicious. And you know what the recidivism rate is for parolees and probation people? About 99% of them commit another crime. So I'm getting way off track here because I empathize with people that love our town and the environment in general and have gone to great lengths and are suffering losses to comply and support our water enterprise. And the idea that you are going to continue to reward water abusers, not require commercial users to cut back the same way you have everybody else, is just unconscionable, you guys. Please think about it, talk about it, do whatever you need to do to get yourself to the right place. And I mean the right place for the general population of the city of St. Helena. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. I'll look to the city clerk to see if there are additional comments.
There are no other hands raised.
Okay, I'll bring it back now to the council. I recognize and we recognize how challenging this is. You know, my understanding of what we're looking at here is a method to gain compliance, and that the forgiveness only comes with compliance. I believe a graduated approach as we move into the deeper phases, as we ramp up, is important. It's very difficult to change a culture overnight by snapping our fingers or waving a wand. Sometimes I use the analogy of a big ship turning in the water. It doesn't just lift up and turn 180 degrees. It's a changing by degrees. We've got to push it. We've got to push it harder, but we have to do it in a managed way, which is what in looking at this approach, it's graduated as the months go up. We can look at how those are adjusted. I do, as we move towards our July 27th meeting, looking at those equitabilities between commercial and residential users, it's critical. One of the things I will say about other communities that I've talked to is when they point out a number that their goal is, one city has a 40% goal for both residents and businesses. But in talking to them, those are aspirational in a sense, and they work with individual users to try to get to the highest number they can. And that's our intention here too. We don't want to just leave this on the table with folks feeling like they can be complacent. We want to urge absolute focus on this issue, and we think that this graduated approach is the best way to get us there. One of the things that's important to recognize is that St. Helena, the phase 2 water restrictions are challenging, but they give us a clear strategic approach to managing the situation through this summer and beyond. So until more rain comes, our goal of remaining in phase 2 restrictions instead of the more severe phase 3 is attainable if we work together. And that's what this is attempting to do, is getting all those users, particularly those large users who are over, to shift into a different gear where we're all pulling together. That's where I am right now. Are there any other council comments at this point?
Well, I don't have a comment at this moment, other than I would really like to hear what Vice Mayor Doring has to say.
Well, I'm in general favor of the staff recommendation, but I want to drill down and maybe add some more to it. I would like to maybe in the motion that would be made, direct the staff to try to come up with different ways over the long term to offer rebates or some kind of a reward system for folks who have maintained compliance all along. I'll leave that up to staff. I think we already actually have some of those programs. Maybe we should beef those up, something in that regard. I'd also want to know that at some point, and it sounds like the mayor has maybe hinted to this, there will be an adjustment in terms of the burden that has been placed on commercial versus residential. I would like to hear more about that. I would definitely want to see that adjustment made sooner rather than later. And if the mayor thinks that's coming on the 27th, so be it. But I'm not going to support this unless we deal with that, because it's clear to me that there probably would have been a lot more commercial penalties had we made a little bit more reasonable adjustment at that time when we actually had an urgency ordinance that required 4 votes. And I expressed reservations at that time, and I know we set July 27th to revisit that issue. That's going to be an important policy issue for us so we can get more equity in the system. And then I guess the third thing I would add to whatever this motion is going to be is that the issue I raised earlier on is we absolutely have to come up with an objective policy that the Water Advisory Board can use to kind of sort through those leak adjustment applications. And I agree with the Dr. Mitz's recommendation that we should maybe rely on what we have and tweak it to the extent we need to. Those are the 3 things I would add on to the staff recommendation to make this work. It's a difficult issue, and what I'm concerned about is pitting neighbor against neighbor, and you know, it's unfortunate. We just need to make it as easy as possible, but also hold people accountable for their water usage. And you know, it's a difficult time. A lot of people leave during the summertime. Folks are not really paying attention to their water use. Some of us are. I am. I have bed lawn. I'm very sympathetic to, you know, the points that Mr. Belt, Mr. Smithers, and Mr. Hardy have made with regard to, you know, after 30 years of, you know, landscaping being grown in your house, all of a sudden it's dead now. You know, that's hard to take for some people. So we need to at least figure out a way. We probably were never going to address that completely equitably, but some kind of bone thrown to folks who've actually worked hard to keep their water use down over time. And I agree with you, Councilman Hardy. I think you're right. You know, the quicker we can get out of phase 2, the better. I'm worried about this year, but I'm frankly more worried about next year. And I think anybody who's following this closely sees we are in a difficult spot right now. And if folks are still in denial right now, they have to get their heads out of the sand. We are in a very serious situation right now, and it's going to be even more difficult next year.
Appreciate those comments, Vice Mayor, and reiterating the seriousness of the situation. And my comments on top of that is why we are trying to work towards sort of, I would say, synthesizing how we're coming at this so we find a path that we get everybody moving forward together on. Mr. Hardy or Councilmember Hardy, any response on Councilmember or Vice Mayor Doring's comments?
Yes, thank you. Well, the subject of how we balance the restriction on commercial and here I want to back up a second because I think all of us tend to identify the non-residential category as commercial, and it isn't just commercial. It's everything that isn't residential. So that includes commercial users and institutional users, schools, the city itself, if the city were getting a water bill, but I know it includes a school district, it includes churches, think about the non-residential conservation requirements in terms of, what that burden really looks like from the user side. You actually have to break it down in more detail than we've ever attempted to do in our ordinance. So it's a hard thing to figure out how to balance this non-residential side, which is structured as a percentage reduction, with a residential side, which is structured very differently with a per person allocation and an irrigation allocation. They're hard things to compare. That said, my initial approach was just to download with the city clerk's kind assistance all of the water emergency ordinances that we've had since the mid-70s. And if I look at it over time, I see a big shift in how the ordinances were structured. But I'm also very cognizant of the fact that this is the first time any of those ordinances has been put to a hard test in an extended drought. And it's a real ugly and uncomfortable thing. But the reality is we don't learn what works and what doesn't work in this structure until we put it to use. So that is hard. I think we can improve it. But we also then have important process-related questions. We have the whole package in effect coming back to us at our next regularly scheduled meeting. But are we going to amend the ordinance on an urgency basis and at a subsequent meeting? Well, we could decide that in our July 27 meeting. But absent that, there's no way to do it quickly. So, only another urgency ordinance will get a change in effect in a short period of time.
Shall we, in a sense, separate that as we head towards the 27th? I think it's important to lay that out as you did, and then look at what we have here before us, making sure that we're recognizing Mr. Doring's additions.
Well, I mean, I think the equity side of this is very important to Vice Mayor Doring. It's obviously very important to the relatively small number of people who commented. At this point, I can count 3 who've actually submitted a comment. So it's very important. It's challenging both from a process perspective and from a content perspective. I suppose in sum, all I can say at this point is I think we will want and need to make some change. I have no particular sense how that would be structured or what kind of deliberation it will take to reach a conclusion, but I fully expect that to be an important part of what we discuss at our next regular meeting. And I don't, Vice Mayor Doring, you're going to have to remind me now. I got so caught up in the equity part of this, I've forgotten you had 3 points that you wanted sort of somehow reflected in a motion.
Yeah, a direction to staff to analyze what kinds of rewards could be implemented, maybe taking advantage of some of our existing programs that we have for folks, for those who have complied all along, And that is wide open. When I use the word reward, it's very broadly construed. And just to look at the various programs for folks, you know, if they have to replace some of their plants with drought tolerant plants or those kinds of things, you know, so that they're not feeling left out in this kind of thing. Also a commitment that we look hard at rebalancing on the equity side, of the burden side in our next meeting. You know, I know that the number that we all came up with was a number, you know, it had some method to its madness, but and you're right, it's turned out maybe it could be adjusted a little bit there. I think that 10% probably can go up, frankly, a little bit, or even a lot. I don't know. I'll have to hear more. I can't prejudge that. But, you know, a direction that we bring that back so we make that adjustment. And then that we ensure that we have an objective process at the water board in making determinations on leak applications that's based on our existing leak detection policy with a few minor revisions to make it more applicable to our current situation. Those are the three. They're very vague, I understand that, they're very general, but just I'm looking for just a nod that yes, we can do all those. We can get direction on those three, and I'm not looking for an exact remedy at this point, other than to just look at those three. Other than the leak detection, I think we should be very objective there as possible. Those are the three.
Thank you. Then I'll just add two more comments in response. On first, the matter of providing some kind of incentive, reward, whatever we call it, for customers who are actively pursuing conservation. I'm not sure I'd want to incorporate that into the same motion. Well, I don't even know that needs a motion, but I certainly support you know, giving staff some direction there. And my first thought, frankly, is that funding program for, you know, whether it's irrigation improvements or xeriscape or whatever, right off the top, it makes a whole lot of sense to me to consider allocating some part of the penalties we receive to just that purpose. There's I don't know, for me, there's a very appealing logic in putting the penalties to work saving water. And on the leak related relief and policy, I don't know. I don't know how much detail can be unpacked from the data that's in the meters. The way it was described, it may be possible to get a pretty clear picture of when the leak's occurring and what kind and how much water's involved. But you know, the concern that jumps up for me when I see leak detection reports in connection with very large penalties or very large overage is, you know, if the leak was just 10% of the amount that the customer went over, then you know, it doesn't make sense to me to sort of wipe the whole penalty out as though there were no excess use at all, excess discretionary use, if you will. But I'm not sure how good the data is going to be in terms of sorting out, you know, what part of the overage was due to the leak and what wasn't. I have no sense there. But if we don't know, I think we may, you know, then you have a real binary choice in terms of your objective or approach. Are you forgiving all of the penalty because there's a leak associated with the account for the month or not? It's either that or you've got to have enough information about the leak to allocate it by percentage. I think that's my only thought there substantively, Vice Mayor.
And I think our policy does incorporate some of those ideas. It's not an all or none. There is some mechanism. Folks have to show that they've done some things to earn, an adjustment.
Well, yeah, and for sure, the leak has to be repaired, right? That would seem to me to be the minimum, and in a timely fashion, whatever that means. This whole subject of leaks in this context, I find a bit alarming. Again, just because it suggests the possibility that some of these leaks actually make a difference in terms of our ability to achieve our conservation goals, and that really does trouble me.
I'm going to circle in with the city manager here as we look at this issue. Getting direction to staff to looking at those large users, the overages, the leaks, prioritizing where the big, drainages in the sense are. Is that something that you can take direction now between now and the 27th to really start looking at where those conversations can happen to help those large users with the overages bring that into compliance?
I know that we'll need to have some internal conversations about that in particular and how we're following up with the larger users. We've only had this data for about 2.5 working days and worked through the weekend to produce this report. So it's a quick turnaround right now. So drilling down on the internal process for how, the frequency by which we read meters is one issue that we'll talk about. And in terms of the equity, the rebalancing consideration of the equity, we've had conversations on that topic already. And I think it will be helpful in advance of the meeting on the 27th for us to run numbers on just some other configurations to give you some perspective on what would have happened in the month of June with different configurations. And in terms of rebates or rewards or incentives, we can work on those topics as well. So we have some work to do, but what's necessary for us today is a really clear understanding of how to place the penalties on the bills that we produce, which I think at this point, and I'll look to the Administrative Services Director, but I think we're looking at those going out on Monday is my estimate. Okay.
Yeah, that would be the goal, is to send them out Monday in conjunction with the penalty letters. Based on council direction today, we will have to provide some more information that will go out in all the mailers. So it's going to be a lot of work that we need to get everything falling into line. But our goal right now is to get everything out by Monday.
Okay. So do we have enough direction to staff combined with a recommendation for a motion to move forward with this?
It would be helpful to have a motion.
Do we have a motion from a council member?
I'll move approval of the staff recommendation with respect to suspending a portion of the penalties, which would be forgiven in the event that that is to say, the suspended portion would be forgiven if the customer is in full compliance for August, September, October, and November, month by month.
And would that motion also include the 3 provisions that Vice Mayor Doring introduced regarding staff direction to evaluate rebates or rewards for customers who have conserved all along, the adjustments, consideration of alternatives related to the consideration of the burden among different user types, and then working on an objective policy with respect to water penalties and the leaks and the Water Advisory Board.
Well, I'm in support of all those things. I didn't, it's not clear to me that that direction requires a motion, but I'm happy to incorporate it if that's helpful.
Thank you. Is there a second?
If it's incorporated, I do second that. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so with that, that is our item 5.1. Again,
we need
yes.
a vote, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yes.
And I have just a quick question of clarification. I think our Administrative Services Director may have a point of clarification.
Yes, just a point of clarification on the motion that was made by Lester. The recommendation is that all penalties for June and July will be forgiven if the customer does not exceed their allocation for the months of August, September, October, November. And in the motion by Councilmember Hardy, it was that only the suspended portion would be forgiven. So just some clarification on council's wishes for that.
Well, that just takes me to a question then. That forgiveness of the non-suspended part would show up in the form of a credit on a future bill? How would you do that?
It would be a credit on a future bill that the customer has the choice whether they'd like to keep it as a credit or if they'd like us to refund it. So it would be up to initially it'd be a credit, and then it would be customer discretion if they like to actually have it refunded in the form of a check.
Why would you offer them the choice? That's a lot of checks.
We're looking, it is, so right now it'd be 900 checks, provided that every single customer actually meets those allocations for the months of August, September, October, November. It's, for me, I'm looking at the dollar amount of it. If, maybe I received a $10,000 penalty and then I worked really hard and actually, met all my allocations. Do I want $10,000 sitting on my account that could potentially take 2 to 3 years to maybe use that? That's the thought process behind the option.
Okay, understood.
Mark?
So I'll correct my motion and just to clarify that I'm moving approval of the staff recommendation as presented, which would refund or eliminate all penalties for those users who are in full compliance in the 4-month period, August through November, and with the additional direction to staff as described by Vice Mayor Doring.
And could and for my own clarification, that would apply regardless of whether the city adjusted conservation targets for phase 2 water emergency, the phase 2 water emergency.
Yes, I think full compliance for that entire period is required no matter what.
Regardless of whether the conservation targets are adjusted.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And so we're looking for a roll call.
Did you second Vice Mayor Doring? Did you second Councilmember Hardy's?
I want to have a little bit more discussion on the last point that was raised. I'm not sure I'm there yet with that part of it. Walk me through an example of that, Mark, so I can more fully understand that. I don't know if I want to close that door now before the July 27th hearing completely. It would be, in my mind, it would be interesting to revisit it at that time, depending on what the data shows. So tell me what the point is you're getting at so we can discuss that a little more detail.
Right. So hypothetically, on the non-residential side, let's say that the number is adjusted from 10% to something higher. We'll use 20% as an example.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I get it.
We will, okay, so we would, it would lead at whatever point in time that becomes effective, it would likely be between now and November, right? So it could be as early as August. It could apply as early as August 1, let's say. If we had the council meeting on the 27th, we adopt an urgency ordinance 2 days later that becomes effective on the 1st of August, and meter reads for the month of August and applies for the August data. And it requires more, I guess, let me go back and think this through a little bit. The penalties are for June and July. So if it's not implemented before the end of July, which I guess you'd have a couple days if we had a pro rata share, it wouldn't affect, I guess it wouldn't affect June and July in most cases, unless we quickly turned something around on the 27th or did something between now and the 27th.
Okay, I just want to, I understand the penalty structure and the revision of the penalty structure. That could be further revised depending on how the burden is shifted. But folks would then have to live with that allocation, whatever it is. But then the penalties would still be incorporated. So yeah, there's going to be a short window of time. I think I'm okay with that. I understand that concept. And I'll second the motion.
Thank you.
And do we have a roll call, Cindy?
Okay. Councilor Hardy,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for the focus on this. We'll adjourn here in just a moment. One of the things I do want to say is that, you know, as we look at this, as we did in the pandemic, we're looking both in our city, how we work to get best steps forward, but we're also working regionally. We're communicating through all levels of government, state, federal, regional, how we deal with the situation that is affecting everybody, certainly in the West or in California. So I just want to thank everybody for the focus, and just remember, as we worked with this team through the challenges of the pandemic, of the civil unrest, the fires, and we found a way to navigate through. It's when we all work together that we get there. So thank you very much, and we will continue circling back on this issue. Thanks for all the work, everybody. And we'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
See you soon.